Israeli public opinion. Do you think Israeli public opinion would change if the media changed?
That's a big question that I kept on asking myself for many years concerning the occupation. Would the Israelis know everything about the brutality and the cruelty of the occupation? Would they change their minds? It's a speculation. I truly believe that for sure, at least among part of the Israelis, it might have brought to a change in their perceptions, because would they really know how cruel the occupation is, I think they couldn't live in peace with it. And they would have understood that democracy, a civilized society, cannot live with such phenomena in its backyard. But, it's just a speculation, because the matter of fact is that most of the Israelis are not exposed. One more remark, you might also say that the Israelis who want to know, they can quite easily know, because if you are really interested, you have the place where to look at, both in the Israeli media and in foreign media. The problem is that most of them also don't want to know. That's the problem.
I just wanted to be specific about what I said. The Human Rights Watch report says Israel is indiscriminately targeting civilians. I said deliberately. They said indiscriminately. Habib Bata, you've been comparing the same network, that is CNN, with CNN International. Is that right? Can you see what we see here in the United States, which is different than CNN International?
Yeah, it's very interesting that there is a very big difference in the reporting styles of CNN International and CNN United States. Reporters on the American network will, recently a reporter with the IDF said that Hezbollah is like no terror organization Israel has ever seen. Whereas the international reporters won't describe Hezbollah as a terrorist organization. They'll call it a militia. So you kind of wonder, why would they adjust the message based on the audience when the goal is journalism? It shouldn't really change from audience to audience. And in that way, again, we are seeing a reflection of the American policy of labeling Hezbollah as a terrorist organization.
Peter Hart of Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting the images that we see in the United States.
I think it goes without saying that Americans see a very different war in this case, and in most cases. You're mentioning the Human Rights Watch report. It's reported halfway through a page one story in the New York Times today. The headline in the New York Times is "Civilians Lose as Fighters Slip into Fog of War." The subhead is "Lebanese Deaths Show Dilemma for Israel." That is the approach, I think, of a lot of television reporters, that there is a PR battle that Israel is losing if we show the realities of this war. There's a CNN show called Reliable Sources, the media discussion show, hosted by Howard Kurtz, the Washington Post reporter. It has been obsessed with the idea that television might be too graphic in the United States, that people will get the wrong impression being that Lebanese civilians are the ones who are suffering under this bombardment from the Israeli military. That is underscored by CNN reporters, Anderson Cooper, Paul Lazan, Wolf Blitzer, constantly reminding viewers after a particularly gruesome or graphic report that Hezbollah hides among civilians. So this is the trouble you get into when you do this. It's reminiscent after 9/11 and when the war in Afghanistan began. There was a memo inside CNN. If you're showing graphic images of Afghanistan, remind viewers that this is happening because of 9/11. CNN would cut back to ground zero to remind people that however you feel about those images, if you feel that these people are suffering for no reason, you should be reminded that they're getting something that they deserve. And I think that's the message that CNN and much of the rest of the media is sending right now.
It's interesting. I was invited on MSNBC and Chris Matthews' show Hardball for the 10th anniversary of MSNBC, and they were doing it live from Rockefeller Plaza. He usually does it in Washington, D.C. And there was a crowd of bystanders. And when we were in commercial, the producers said to people, if they're going to be on camera, they were handing out American flags. So on the one hand, they said these are just New Yorkers, and if you wanted to be called on, you'd wave that American flag, whatever your view was. But it certainly skewed the image that people had of who these New Yorkers were.
And I think there really is no debate in the media about the current war. There is no debate in Washington. I think the media reflects that. I think the only real dissenter who's regularly on the American media is Pat Buchanan. And that really says something about the spectrum of debate. Public opinion polls suggest that there's a good chunk of the American public who thinks this has gone too far. The Israeli response has gone too far. That idea is mentioned almost nowhere in the American media.
I wanted to go back to Gideon Levy, Israeli journalist with Haaretz. Your piece, Operation Peace for the IDF. The war that the IDF has declared on Lebanon and Gaza will never be considered another war of no choice. This is unequivocally a war of choice, you write. Why?
I think there is no doubt about it. There was a provocation made by the Hezbollah, and Israel has chosen to react in a very, very, very aggressive way, attacking almost all Lebanon. And this is a war of choice. Justified or not, it was a choice of Israel to react. It could have reacted in a much more limited way, local way, just attacking the Hezbollah bases around the border. But Israel chose to go to an overall war against Hezbollah, which is almost an overall war against Lebanon. This is a classical war of choice.
Can I just add, it's not almost a war
in Beirut.
Yeah, it's not almost a war. Being here in Beirut, you just have to go down to the gas station and find that there's no gasoline, or go to the hospital and find out that in a matter of days, life support systems will probably end because there's no more electricity in the country. So it's not really a war against Hezbollah, and it's very disheartening to watch the reporters report from a major bridge and say this was a Hezbollah supply line, when actually, for all we know, Hezbollah was probably out in the bushes or on some, four-wheel drive. This was a major civilian bridge that hundreds of thousands of people were using. Another big problem that I also see, and I would build on the point about the CNN memo, is I was watching CNN last night, and they were reading a viewer opinion, and it was an opinion of a New York City fireman, and the anchor introduced it by saying it was a very emotional letter, and the fireman was saying from New York City that you only have to stand on 9/11, the ruins of 9/11, to understand all of this death and killing in the world today. And so we wonder, what does Lebanon have to do? This conflict between territory and soldiers and prisoners has to do with the events of September 11th. Nothing really.
I wanted to ask you, Habib Battah, about the bombing of Al-Manar, the communications tower, at the beginning of the attack. The TV station.
Sure. Al-Manar, if you're not familiar, it's actually a network that is very strongly supportive of Hezbollah. It wasn't the only channel that was targeted by Israel, though. Israel also targeted the communication towers for several Lebanese stations, including LBC, which is a Christian broadcaster and the most vocally critical of Hezbollah, the only network that seems to be actually criticizing Hezbollah at this point. It's very strange to understand their strategy, why they would be knocking that out. The view was that basically the images being shown on international television were very strong. And the follow-up of reporters is also important, and I haven't seen that follow-up. I haven't seen a lot of reporters asking Israeli officials just why they bombed the towers that were used by LBC.
Habib Battah, we're going to have to leave it there. Managing editor of Middle East Broadcasters, also Peter Hart of Fairness and Accuracy Reporting, and finally Gideon Levy of Haaretz newspaper, speaking to us from Tel Aviv. And that does it for today's broadcast. Mohammed Bazi will join us tomorrow on Democracy Now!, along with Juan Cole. So tune in on Friday. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks to Mike Berkshire, Abdul Kadus, John Hamilton, Elizabeth Press, Yoruba Rich, and Aaron Mate, Frank Lopez, Mike Filippo, Nick Marsilio, our engineer. Special thanks to Danielle Stramberg-Peshkin. I'm Amy Goodman.